we're starting to hear news reports that the U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world, so I think as a public we're starting to understand this. But the fact that in the 50s the U.S. incarceration rate was in between that of Denmark and Finland, I don't think we always realize that it wasn't always the case in the U.S. And so a lot of factors were involved. One of the most important, political decisions, changing the law in terms of what were the sentencing requirements. So a lot of crimes that used to not carry prison sentences now carry mandatory sentences. Crimes that carried a couple years, in some cases now a minimum 10 years, often up to life in prison. And what I was interested in is, why did our political leaders, why did the criminal justice system move in this punitive direction? And that's where the role of the public. This was a response to rising public punitiveness.
Rising public punitiveness fueled by what?
This really started although we see the rise of mass incarceration taking off in the 70s, the process goes back to the 60s. And, of course, the 60s were a tumultuous era. Crime rates were beginning to spike. And what I am able to show is media coverage of those rising crime rates connected that process and helped the public think about this, and the public reaction was a demand for tougher, just a more tough-on-crime approach. And we see in the 60s the political leaders of the era beginning to respond. And what's interesting is when the political leaders responded, and so I'm thinking of Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson, then Nixon, the public didn't turn around and become less punitive. The crime rate continued to rise. Public punitiveness, this public demand for being tougher on crime continued to rise, and the political system continued to follow.